America's next recession is going to look a lot different than what people experienced back in 2008. The housing market collapse, Wall Street panic, mass unemployment, and even deflation. But today, the next recession is already forming. Well, I guess Wall Street's still panicking, but for some different reasons, which we'll get into later. Consumer sentiment is at some of the lowest levels it's ever reached. Inflation remains elevated, and many CEOs across the country are sounding alarms. Now, some economists and folks on Wall Street will point to unemployment being historically low, GDP holding up, at least for now, and they'll use this as proof that everything's fine. But ask anyone trying to make rent, buy a home, feed a family, or even find a job, and the reality then feels very different. The middle class is shrinking, essentials are more expensive, and it doesn't really seem like there's any light at the end of the tunnel. The next recession isn't going to start with a bang. It's going to occur slowly, then all at once. And in this video, we'll break down how America's next recession will look different, who it will hit, and why some of the most powerful people in the country are actually going to benefit from it. See, unlike the 2008 financial crisis, which was marked by deflation and collapsing demand, the current economic environment is characterized by stagflation, a combination of stagnant economic growth and persistent inflation. Stagflation occurs when the economy experiences slow growth, high unemployment, and rising prices all simultaneously. This rare phenomenon poses a dilemma for policymakers, especially the Federal Reserve, whose job is to promote maximum employment and stabilize prices. Their limited measures to slow inflation can also wind up further suppressing growth at the same time. It's a delicate balance, and they've been actively trying to accomplish this since inflation peaked back in 2022. The Fed was hoping to achieve a soft landing, one where they tamp down inflation without causing a recession. But now, with the recent policy changes from the White House, all of this is up in the air. Now, despite inflation moderating over the past 2 years, it still remains elevated above the Fed's target rate of 2%. It's been particularly sticky in essential goods and services. GDP growth does appear to be slowing, with consumer spending weakening and business investment declining. While we won't get official GDP numbers until the end of the month, several economists have projected lower than expected growth. And also, those numbers aren't forward-looking, so Q2 could look a lot different and a lot worse when we really get a full picture of the effects from tariffs. Now, I mentioned unemployment rates are currently historically low, but job growth is decelerating, and in many areas, wage increases are not keeping up to pace with inflation. So it's not really the same setup as '08, but for a lot of people, it's starting to remind them of just how painful that time was. Because here's what we're not going to see in this recession: a collapse of the housing market, lower interest rates, deflation, which is when prices decrease, and mass unemployment is going to be completely contingent on how long some of these tariffs stay in effect. The CEO of Flexport, which is a global logistics platform and freight forwarder that helps businesses manage and move goods internationally, said this if the 145% tariffs against China remain in effect.
If they don't change anything and this 145% duty sticks on China, it'll take out like mass bankruptcies. You're talking like 80% of small business that buys from China will just die. And millions of employees will go, will be unemployed. I mean, it's sort of why I'm like, they obviously have to back off the trade. Like, that can't be that they just do that.
But aren't you also saying China will likely not back down because they probably have done the math?
I just think the U.S. backs down and China doesn't.
And I don't think this is just some economic theory, because we're beginning to hear from some of the biggest companies in the world as they express their concerns during their earnings calls. American Airlines pulled their full-year guidance entirely, which means they have no idea what to expect with the consumer and the brewing trade war caused by the Trump administration. And obviously, companies don't do this kind of thing when they're confident about where the economy is headed. They attributed their downturn to economic challenges and consumer fears of a recession, compounded by the rising prices due to tariffs. Their CEO came right out and said it. Aircraft cost too much already. I don't want to pay any more for aircraft. This is not something we would intend to absorb, and I'll tell you, it's not something I would expect our customers to welcome. Now, over at Procter & Gamble, CFO Andre Schulten pointed to retail traffic falling and a quote, wait-and-see attitude from consumers. That's P&G, the biggest consumer staples company in the world. So when they start seeing people pull back on basic household items, it's a signal. Even companies that have quietly raised prices for years are now going to have to go even further. PepsiCo slashed their earnings forecast, blaming both tariffs and what they called a subdued customer, and they're shifting strategy, offering smaller, cheaper product packages because shoppers are prioritizing value over brand. Now, Pepsi's been notorious for shrinkflation over the years, and it appears they'll just lean further into that in the coming quarters. But then there's Chipotle. For the first time since 2020, same-store sales dropped. Executives said traffic started slowing in February and has stayed soft throughout April. Chipotle's CEO, Scott Boatwright, put it like this: saving money because of concerns around the economy was the overwhelming reason consumers were reducing the frequency of restaurant visits. Now, Chipotle said they wouldn't raise prices right away, but are certainly going to have to if these tariffs stay in effect. So I don't think that's just a dip. I think it's a change in how people are thinking and acting. But it's not just companies noticing this shift. Consumer data paints the same grim picture. The University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index dropped for the 4th consecutive month and hit the lowest reading since the 2022 post-pandemic inflation, and the second lowest reading on record since the survey had began in 1952. People are more pessimistic about the economy now than they were during COVID, the financial crisis, and the dot-com bust. Consumers now anticipate prices will climb 6.7% over the next year, the highest expected change since 1981. That tells us people don't think prices are going to come down anytime soon, nor should they really have any reason to think that given the policies that are being implemented and proposed. So consumers and companies are bracing for a long, expensive road ahead. But some companies aren't waiting to see how this all plays out. They're making moves now. Ford recently told dealers that car prices would likely rise in the coming months thanks to the auto tariffs. But for now, they're running ads pushing buy now before prices go up, trying to clear inventory before tariffs bite into margins. They're offering employee pricing across most models. But that's not because they're eating the cost of the tariff. It's because they were already sitting on elevated inventories that they need to try to sell, and they can use this as a time to entice panic buying. It's really a win-win for them. If tariffs get delayed or walked back, they've triggered a wave of panic buying. But if the tariffs do end up hitting, they've padded sales ahead of time to brace for what will likely be slower sales in Q2 and Q3. And in the meantime, I guess consumers can feel like they're getting a deal on a new vehicle. Either way, the play is short term, but this tells you how big of a role policy uncertainty, especially tariffs, is playing in corporate planning right now. And it just goes to show you how companies are trying to navigate this volatile time. In 2008, it was Wall Street greed, bad loans, and a housing collapse that wrecked the economy.
Hey, there's a bubble.
Mark, you sure?
Yeah, it's time to call bullshit.
Bullshit on what?
Every fucking thing.
This time it's different. Because the reality is, we're living in two different economies now. There's the economy who owns stocks, real estate, and assets, the ones who can ride out this volatility and even benefit from it. And then there's the economy for everybody else, who just get crushed by all of these changes. We're not seeing massive financial fraud or reckless mortgages tanking the system overnight. What we're seeing now is death by 1,000 paper cuts, created by the very people in charge. Now, policy decisions, tariffs, corporate greed, sticky inflation are all setting the table for a recession that was, in my opinion, completely avoidable. It doesn't mean the economy was doing absolutely amazing beforehand, but at this point, I think some of this is just being done on purpose. When you jack up tariffs by over 100%, you don't hurt the billionaire class. I mean, sure, some of their assets will go down too, but it's all relative to the amount of wealth you actually have. And in this case, who you really hurt is the consumer who's living paycheck to paycheck. You also hurt middle-class families trying to make ends meet. When interest rates stay high, when inflation remains persistent, you don't punish corporate giants who can access cheap debt. You punish small businesses, first-time homebuyers, and working families. These aren't accidents. These are policy choices made with full knowledge of who will feel the pain the most. And in a system where crisis breeds opportunity for the wealthy, a controlled economic downturn isn't actually the worst-case scenario. It's a feature. Companies slash jobs to boost earnings, investors scoop up distressed assets at fire sale prices, and politicians can blame it on China or inevitable cycles. But a lot of it was just manufactured in plain sight. So no, the recession won't feel like '08. Wealth won't be disappearing. It'll just be moving, consolidating even further at the top. It'll be slower, it'll be harder to define in the moment. But by the time the numbers catch up to the reality most people are already living in, The people who set this chain of events in motion will be busy profiting from the aftermath. Now, if you enjoy this video and you want to learn all about why so many people are wrong about tariffs, well, I covered it in this video here. Go ahead and check it out next. Thanks for watching.